Hello and welcome back to the Confidence Show. I am delighted to welcome another guest here today. Today we've got Emma Cossey, who is a coach for freelancers with over 12 years of freelancing experience under her belt. She's a huge fan of tech, apps and automations to make life easier, faster and more fun, especially as someone who has recently been diagnosed with ADHD. She's also the host of the Freelancers Teabreak podcast, where you'll find episodes full of tips, news and discussions for freelancers. Welcome, Emma. It's so lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really looking forward to this chat.
Me too. I can't wait. We were chatting a little bit before we kind of hit record. So we've got so much to dive into, specifically around like ADHD and being neurodivergent. But before we talk about that, let's just talk a little bit about how you got into freelancing. So what made you decide to become a freelancer and move away from the typical 9-to-5 life?
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of people, I didn't decide. I fell into it. So I graduated and I went into a job in recruitment, which I was terrible at because I'm no good at cold calling. I moved into a job in HR, which I really struggled with because of the attention to detail. And there was also quite a lot of workplace bullying there. So I left that role and I joined Twitter. And this was back in 2009. So I joined Twitter and I was just like, I'll just join while I'm looking for other jobs. I was just looking like for reception jobs or something that didn't require loads of detail and things like that, because I was feeling my self-esteem was just on the floor. So I needed something that I didn't feel would be too challenging. Obviously, some reception jobs are very challenging, but I was looking sort of for a quiet one. And I saw a couple of the blogs that I loved reading all the way through university were looking for internships and things like that. And Wahanda, which I can't remember what they're now called, but they're like a spa and beauty salon group type thing. And a couple of other people, they all were running internships. So I applied for the internships. I got a couple of them, and then from one of those, I ended up getting my first job as a freelance editorial assistant, which blew my mind. I always loved writing. I never thought I could actually do it. So to be able to do some kind of editorial and content writing and things like that was incredible. And then from there, I went on and I worked for Agua Media, who did some of the very first fashion blogs, so like Chihuahua and Catwalk Queen and that sort of thing. And that was incredible to be able to just write about shoes and bags and books, and it was wonderful. But ever since then, I've done everything from tweeting about car programs for some of the Sky channels, to being the toothpaste mascot for Dancing on Ice. So loads of different things on Twitter and stuff like that. I also did a lot of online content. Social media seemed to be what I was drawn towards. And then eventually I had my son 7 years ago, and I retrained as a coach because I had been creating a lot of content to help other people go freelance. I felt like it was something that was very overwhelming for people and they don't know it's an option. And for me, it was just this perfect fit. Like I could control things, I could do things at my own pace, but also do exciting things, and no day was the same. And I really wanted to make sure that freelancing was an option out there for people, not just like, especially for graduates, join a graduate scheme. That was the only option that was told to me, and I would have loved the opportunity to try the kind of buffet career of freelancing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so good that you've done so many different roles. And as you say, there's so much joy in that, and in no 2 days being the same, because it can get really monotonous. It can get really boring when you're just going to the same place, having the same conversations, doing the same stuff. What did I want to touch on then? I was going to say something based on what you just said. This is what my brain does. I was like, oh, that's so interesting, and then forgot that I was supposed to ask a question. So when it came to moving from like your 9-to-5 into freelancing, how did you stop yourself from overworking? Because as you say, when you freelance, like, it becomes so exciting, you've got so much that you're doing, and you have this passion that you don't necessarily have in your 9 to 5. And one of the things that I am pretty bad at is overworking. So how did you kind of prevent yourself from doing that?
Um, I mean, pre having a family, I didn't really set boundaries because I just kind of went with where my passion was, basically. And as long as I was able to, still see friends and families and things like that, it didn't really bother me if I was working in the evenings. If I felt like that was a draining thing or something that didn't work for me, then I think I would have set a boundary there. But for me, my freelance work recharges me,
Mm.
and therefore I didn't feel quite the pressure. But there were things I had to do, like working from home. I'm an introvert. I would have very happily not seen people, but it is very healthy to see people. So I had to push myself to go out and do networking, co-working. So I had to set those kind of boundaries in place, I guess, to make sure that I don't go full hermit.
Mm.
Um, and I think the hardest boundaries actually was setting them with myself and other people, because working, particularly, and you probably know this, working from home, suddenly you become the go-to person, like, oh, I've got a day off, shall I pop round for a coffee? And you're like, no, because I'm actually working, I'm working from home. And I think the one nice thing about COVID is I think people understand that better now. But yeah, there's definitely, people take it less seriously, I think, when you're freelance or working from home sometimes. Not so much now, but yeah, or they expect you to be like extra childcare or be the person that's always in for their packages. Christmas is always a fun time for that. So I think that's actually a harder boundary to set, that one between you and the people around you, than necessarily between you and your work.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I like that you just said how, like, your work recharges you, because
Mm.
I go through phases where I feel like that, and sometimes, like, my favorite time to work is between like 9 and midnight, and I enjoy it and it feels so good and I love it. But then go on social media, or like my family are like, you shouldn't be working that late. Like, that's no time to work. Like, that's a silly time to sit up till. And then that kind of makes me think like, oh, am I doing something wrong? When actually, like, my work, I enjoy my work, so why should
Yeah.
I not? And the whole point of, like, being a freelancer and working for yourself is to work on your own terms, and sometimes I forget that, and I definitely resonate with the feeling recharged from what you're doing. Um, Before we, like, started recording, one of the things that we was talking about is the fact that I wanted to chat with you because of a post that I'd seen on your Instagram about recently being diagnosed with ADHD. And as we were just discussing, it's something that I very much believe that I have. What was it? What kind of symptoms or patterns did you notice that really led to you seeking the ADHD diagnosis?
Yeah. So I was diagnosed, so I'm 37 now, but I was diagnosed just before my 37th birthday. So quite a late diagnosed person. So, TikTok, definitely. And I know everyone goes, oh, but if you're watching TikTok and you're getting it from that, it's just because it's trendy. The reason TikTok is so popular with neurodivergent people is because it's built for our brains. It's
Mhm.
short, easily consumable content. Everyone's talking about their passions. It is built for us. So, of course, there's going to be a lot more people talking about it on TikTok because there's more of us that love TikTok because of how our brains are built. And I was following a lot of stuff on there. There's an account called Struggle Care in particular that was incredible. Actually, I think it's Domestic Blisters on there. She has two different names. And I was reading all this stuff and I was like, this really sounds like me. And I've definitely struggled more since I had my son sort of 7 years ago. 2 years in, I got diagnosed with anxiety and I've got put on antidepressants, and that did help a little bit. But I always felt overwhelmed, always incredibly tired all the time, never woke up feeling refreshed or anything like that. Um, Attention to details I mentioned before was never great. Um, I get distracted very easily. And the more I was reading about it, and I think I'd already always disregarded it because I was also tired. And I was like, well, people with ADHD have loads of energy.
Mhm.
And then I discovered inattentive, which is basically where your brain is very busy. Your body might not be, but your brain is very busy. And that's incredibly draining. And I've been on medication now for 3 weeks, and I'm realizing how busy my brain was without even realizing, because my energy is so much better now. Um, so yeah, the kind of inattentive gets overlooked in women and girls a lot, because it is traditionally the girl at school who maybe is a little bit daydreamy. All of their school reports will say things like, you know, clearly an intelligent child or knows what they're talking about, but doesn't see things through, could do better. We know they've got potential, but they're not fulfilling that potential, all those kind of things. There might also be a bit of they chat too much, that kind of thing. So when you go back at your school reports and have a look, it's quite amazing to see all those things. And I think another point was when I went to university, and suddenly all the structures that had kind of helped me through school were no longer there, and I had to motivate myself. And yeah, university was a real struggle for me. I really, really found it very difficult. Even small things, I know this sounds ridiculous, but I found it really difficult to work out where things were on the university map, where my classes were. And they'd be like, I try and find it 2 or 3 times, and I'd be so embarrassed that I couldn't find it. I just wouldn't go to the lessons. And I had to motivate myself. And that's a big thing I've learned about ADHD, is you have to kickstart your own motivation. The dopamine in our brains that produces that kind of motivation, from my understanding, our brains are too efficient, and it works through the dopamine too quickly and gets out of the system too quickly. And therefore, me trying to motivate myself to do a piece of coursework, I didn't know all the tools that I now know about how to motivate myself, and I struggled so much then. So yeah, I've gone off on a lot of tangents there, which is still the case even on medication. But yeah, I guess to summarize, extreme tiredness, struggling to concentrate, attention to detail, clumsiness. Oh, and a big one for me was around the house, just trying to keep in contact, trying to keep on top of housework, and then also my son's life stuff. That became too overwhelming, and I couldn't do it. And even I would sit on the sofa and think, I need to do the dishwasher, and I was just rooted to the sofa thinking, I need to do the dishwasher, I need to do the dishwasher, and I couldn't get off the sofa because the dopamine wasn't there.
My God, that sounds so relatable. I cannot tell you the amount of times, like, mum will come home from work, or mum will say to me, like, why haven't you washed up? And I'm like, I couldn't, like, I can't explain it. I'll be like, oh, I didn't have time, I was really busy. When actually, I couldn't physically get up off the sofa to do it. And I'm like, I know it needs to be done. Like, I know these things. I know that the bathroom needs cleaning. It needed
Yeah.
cleaning yesterday. And I'm like, I just can't do it. And
So you
oh
basically have to trick your brain.
my,
And I've got on my wall actually that I have to remind myself. There's 4 things now that I try and do if I need to get something done. So either make it fun.
mhm.
So like with the dishwasher, I put the Monsters Inc. theme tune on. It sounds bizarre, but there's a TikToker I follow who always uses it, and it always makes me think of like really kind of productive and fun. And also I know if I can get the dishwasher done during that time, then it's done. So I try and make it fun, or it could be like trying a new recipe or something like that.
Mm.
The second thing is make it novel. So if I'm doing my accounts, I have to do my day accounts, I'll probably get a new notebook or new stationery or something to make it fun. Cleaning, I'll go buy a new cleaning product or something like that.
Mm.
It's costly, but sometimes you have to make it novel. Competitive, so that's where I might set a timer and say I have to get it done by this time, or I might say to my son, who's going to tidy this room first, or my husband, I might say, or who's going to do this first. And urgent, which kind of builds into that, but also body doubling. Have you heard about body doubling?
No, not at all.
Okay, body doubling is where you do something with someone else, but they're working their own thing, you're working on your own.
Wow.
So that could be co-working in a co-working space. It could be I will put on a YouTube video of someone cleaning their house when I'm cleaning my house, and that helps. It could be just somebody talking to you whilst you're doing that job, so that your brain can switch off. So like I might get my son to come in and tell me about his day whilst I make the dinner or something like that, because it makes my brain switch off, and I focus on what he's saying instead of all the thoughts of my brain saying stop.
That makes so much sense, because whenever I cook dinner, I'm always like, Mum, can you come and sit and chat to me? Or I have to
Mm.
be watching like something on Netflix, or I have to be doing something else. And
Yeah.
what you were saying earlier about the inattentiveness, like my brain does not stop. It goes and goes and goes. And it's like I have all these ideas and all these things I want to do, but my body is just like, nah, can't do it. And what you were saying as well about being really tired, I've gone on about my tiredness for years, and it's always
Mm.
like, take some iron tablets, like we'll give you some iron tablets, you're low on iron. And I'm like, yeah, but it can't be. Like, even if I sleep for like 8 hours, sometimes I wake up and I'm like, I am so tired today.
Yeah. Yeah. And 100%. I was and it's only now I'm on medication that I realize how bad it was.
Mm,
Um, when I first took the medication, it was the bizarrest thing. I was sat on the sofa and about half an hour in, I was like, someone's turned a sound off in the house. And it was my brain. I hadn't realized. Like it was like a humming had gone from the house. And my energy is so much better. Like I'm not forcing myself to do things. I'm not saying everyone should do medication, but I, I am saying I didn't realize how busy and tiring my brain was
mm.
and exhausting me just by being active. And then you add social media into it and all that. It's really challenging.
It is. That's crazy. And I think it's good that you point out about the medication. Like, not everyone needs it, but then also it helps people, and there's no shame in taking medication. And I think it's a good thing. And you need to do what works best for you to be able to do that. And as you say, you've got so much more energy now just from having the right medication and being able to move forward with that. So that's really, really good for you. What was the kind of process like for you in terms of getting the diagnosis? And did you feel like you needed the professional diagnosis? Because this is something I'm trying to decide whether at the moment, like, part of me's like, I mean, I don't really want to have to wait for somebody to give me permission to say that I've got ADHD, when I look at all the symptoms and I'm like, well, that's just me, and that's me in a nutshell. So
Yeah.
did you feel like you needed that? And what was the kind of process like?
Yeah. So first of all, self-diagnosis is totally valid. Um, and I think every single person I've spoken to who self-diagnosed first and then got diagnosed,
Mm,
yeah, well, they've got diagnosed basically. Um, I think people know their own brains.
mhm,
And I know there's a lot of people that are going to be like, oh, no, you're just doing it because of a trend. But it just, when it ticks the boxes, and you might just be, anyway, I'm going to go on a tangent. Anyway, so I went through Psychiatry UK. So I initially went to the doctor, and that process was like 2 to 3 years. And this was 2 years ago. And then I went through Psychiatry UK. And basically, they are an NHS what's it called? Right to choose partner.
okay.
So it's free. Like they do have a paid service, but basically they've got a letter on there that you can send to the doctor who can refer you, and the process is shorter through Psychiatry UK. Now, I think I ended up, once I went through them, I think it took a year and then probably nearly 6 months to go onto titration, which is where they try you on tablets and they start you on a small amount for a week and then they up it a little bit. And then, so basically they see what works best for you.
Mm.
I think so that I started the process basically at the start of COVID. Um, and I know it's a longer waiting list now. You don't need a diagnosis, but when I got my diagnosis, I felt like it was giving my brain permission to say to myself, it's not your fault. And I
Mm.
think a lot of ADHD people will say that they have the narrative of being lazy and stupid
Yeah.
or too loud, all those kind of things. And suddenly in my brain, I was able to say, instead of, oh, you're really lazy for not doing this thing, I can say, look, your brain really struggles to create the motivation for this.
Mm.
What can we do? Or just something. It just felt like the negative voice was removed that was constantly telling me I was lazy and stupid. And I had this reason. This doctor had told me, this is what's going on in your brain. This is why you're struggling. It's not your fault. That was really powerful for me. But also there's the government has a scheme where they can offer you support as someone with ADHD, but I don't think you need diagnosis for that. I think you can self-refer, which I'll give you the link if you want to pop it in
Yeah.
the notes below. But that can give you support like ADHD coaching, or if you have any other kind of disabilities. It's called Access to Work.
Okay.
They can give you some more support with that. Um, so you don't need it, and it is a personal choice. I but I needed it to get the medication. And also, another thing to think about is, at the age of 37, I'm coming into the point where I'm possibly perimenopausal, and that makes it a lot harder for people with ADHD. And I felt like I was at a point where I needed the medication. So it is a personal decision. There's no right or wrong, but I found it a really positive experience.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I think even for myself, like reading more about ADHD and like believing that that's exactly what I have, just having that, it made me feel like it's not my fault. And it's like for 32 years, I felt like there's something wrong with me, and I felt lazy for
Mm.
days where I just cannot. And I've always kind of put it down to anxiety, really. I've always just thought it was the anxiety. There was a time where I got prescribed like antidepressants. As you said, I never took them, but I got prescribed the antidepressants, and I've just felt like there's something wrong with me. And even just looking at the ADHD now, I'm just like, well, I'm not lazy. And the thing is, like, I can achieve like, I don't know, 6 weeks worth of work in 2 weeks. But then if I'm having like a crash week, as I've started calling it, I'll beat myself up for not being productive. And I'm like, it doesn't matter that I've just achieved 6 weeks of work in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm going to beat myself up because I'm not being productive today.
Yeah, and it's called ADHD paralysis.
Oh, wow.
And it often follows a hyperfocus. So
Mm.
ADHD people often have like numerous hobbies. They've tried knitting and crafting and painting and loads of different things, and they're really into it, and then they're not into it at all. And sometimes that could lead to a crash.
That is exactly me. And even as a child, like I've talked to mum about this, like going back as to when I was a child, used to drive her mad because I'd want to get everything out and I'd be really, really into it and I'd be so focused and I'd do like paint one picture and then I'd be like, no, I'm bored, I want to do something
Yeah.
else. And she was like, it used to drive me mad because you'd never just sit and do something. I'm like, well, now,
Yeah.
like, that's just my brain. Like, of course that's gonna happen.
And actually one of the biggest triggers for me, I forgot about this, is my son was a bigger trigger for working out that I have ADHD, because he is your stereotypical garden variety hyperactive boy who we're now at the point of looking into diagnosis, because he's the schools confirmed they think he has ADHD. I've always thought it ever since he started walking. um and yeah, I watch some of the things he does, and in a way I think it's good, because now I feel like I can understand him better than most. But if I was a neurodivergent parent, a neurotypical parent, I think I would get a lot more frustrated. But because I'm neurodivergent and learning about it myself, I'm able to support him in a better way and not lose my temper and stuff.
Yeah, that's really nice. And I think, as you say, like, because he's still so young, you can start to support him throughout his like growth, which is great. How has having this diagnosis impacted you? Or not having the diagnosis, but how has having ADHD impacted you as a parent? Because I don't have any children yet, but it is something that I'd like in the future. And I'm thinking, oh my God, how am I going to parent with ADHD? And I know so many people do, and they
Yeah.
have thriving children, but how has it impacted you?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is a challenge. I think especially as I am inattentive and he is hyperactive. So I think understanding overstimulation is a massive part of it, actually. Understanding when he's overstimulated or I'm overstimulated. Loop earplugs are amazing. They block out like 40%, 50% of the sound. So um, if he's sort of shouting or screeching, I can block it out and it makes it so much easier. But for loads of things I use it, actually. Um, it is really challenging in terms of, I think I always found it really, really difficult. So I'm trying to remember what the name is, but the thing where people projection dysmorphia or something, I can't remember what it's called. Memory is another problem with ADHD. So I took rejection quite hard, and I think I remember coming out of some, like I took into a messy play type thing, and all the other kids were kind of quietly at their stations, and he was running around like all over the place. And I remember getting in the car and crying because I felt that kind of rejection personally. And I feel rejections for him more.
Mm.
But I think now, understanding my own brain, I'm able to do a lot more with him, a lot more work with his rhythms, a lot more, which makes us both happier as well. I don't know, I just feel like understanding my own ADHD has helped me understand his more, but it is challenging, and we are those that mother and child that turn up at school and he might be wearing a Mario hat and like some kind of crazy coat, and I just don't care because he's happy. And you can kind of, I don't know, I find a lot of the mums on TikTok in particular, their parenting style is perhaps slightly more liberal, but fun, if that makes sense. We kind of prioritize fun because that's where the dopamine goes. You still got to have, obviously, all your rules and your things like that in place. But I think ADHD parents perhaps prioritize fun more because they understand that's how things get done.
That's
That was a very much a ramble, sorry.
no, not at all. But I mean, that's me. Like, I talk the same as you anyway. Like, I'm constantly going off on tangents. My brain's all over the place. Like, I ramble. So we love a ramble here. Don't don't apologize in any way, shape, or form. Now, when it comes to running your business, how does the ADHD impact you, your schedule, and the work that you're able to do?
So before I was even diagnosed or suspecting I had it, I've always loved apps and tools that make things easier, automate things for you, workflows. So always been a big fan of any of those kind of tools. And that's always been something I've built into my business and shared with other freelancers, because anything that takes human error out of it is really great. What else have I done? I think the nature of my work has always made it easy for me to get the work done because I love it. I'm passionate about it. I love social media. I love being creative. So that's all been really good. What was the other part of the question?
How does it impact you, your schedule, and the work that you're able to do?
I mean, before I was on the medication, I used to have to take a nap every single day. So I built that into my day. I knew it had to happen. Thankfully, I'm not having to do that as much, but I definitely was able to build things around what worked for me and what worked for my brain. I think my biggest challenge has always been my addiction to my phone. And unfortunately, it is a little dopamine machine. So he sits there boosting my dopamine, but not enough to actually get anything done. So that's something I definitely have had to set boundaries around. And obviously I'm doing school days now as well. So that kind of limits it. But also that works well because I'm on a shorter deadline, which kind of works with my kind of methods of trying to get things done. And there's something called Parkinson's theory, where basically the work will take as long as you allow for it to take. So because I have a shorter period of time, I get it done in a shorter period of time. And that seems to work quite well for me. Yeah. And just connecting with other neurodivergent people, I think, as well, that's made a big impact as well.
Yeah, just feeling like you're not alone and it's not just you. Like when you say about taking naps, like I take a nap pretty much every single day as well. And sometimes it's not that long. Sometimes it's literally just like 10-15 minutes. Sometimes it's like half an hour, but I have to factor into my day as well, like a chunk of time. It might not even be to nap. I might need like 2 hours in the afternoon to just sit and watch Netflix. And
Yeah.
that's what I do. And then I have my brain telling me that I should be doing this and I should be doing that. And this isn't how successful people work. And what are people going to think? But I need that because I literally just can't. I just have to sit.
Yeah.
And that's what I do. So I
Because your brain is constantly going and you don't realize how many things, and you probably don't even feel like it's that busy, because it's the background noise of all those things that aren't necessarily like words you can hear in your head, but they're just all the thoughts and all the feelings in the background. Yeah, it's exhausting.
sometimes it like makes my like head and my eyes like ache, not like a headache,
Yeah.
but like this like pressure in my eyes, and I'm just like, oh my god, will you just stop thinking
Yeah,
for a minute?
I get it around the jaw as well.
Really?
Yeah, but I know exactly what you mean. It's like a tenseness of
Yeah.
like trying to mask. It probably is almost like a physical masking, because that is another part of ADHD, that we spend our entire lives masking as a neurotypical person. And I think a big thing that a lot of people face when they get their diagnosis is a mourning period, where they're mourning the person that they could have been, the life that they could have had, all those times that they struggled and all those times that they masked. And you kind of do have a demasking thing where you suddenly maybe are more spontaneous, or you do more things that you've always wanted to do. And some people get diagnosed and they suddenly go out and they dye their hair crazy colors and things like that because they feel like it's permission to finally be the neurodivergent that they always have been.
Yeah, I completely understand that. I feel like I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily having like a mourning period as such, but there have been moments where I've like reflected or I've looked back, and the whole like idea of never really living up to what you're able to achieve. Like, I know that I could achieve so much,
Yeah.
but it just has never happened. And like, I've worked hard, I've tried different things, I've followed different, like, I feel like I've done all the things, and I'm like, why am I not where I want to be? And now it's like, oh well, that's because your brain's different. So now it's a bit, for me it's a bit of a mourning, but also it's a bit of a, well, how are we going to get you there
Yeah.
to where you want to be, but in a completely different way? And that kind of leads me on to the next question, because a lot of the advice that we see online comes from neurotypical coaches, mentors, and consultants, yet their advice doesn't work for neurodivergent people. And that can be so frustrating and stressful for people who don't realize they're neurodivergent, like me, or perhaps they do know but don't best know how to manage it. And as I just said, like, I've struggled for years following the advice of other coaches to the letter. I can't tell you
Yeah.
the amount of courses, the amount of programs I've done, and I've done exactly what they've told me to, step by step. I've been like the model student, and I haven't seen results. And part of me is like, oh well, it's just me, like I'm the problem, like it's my fault. And I suppose in some ways it's like, it is my brain, but it's not like I'm not there's nothing wrong with me just because I couldn't do what they were doing. So can you talk a little bit about how or why neurotypical advice doesn't work for you and for neurodivergent people, and what you've learned to do instead so that you can still be successful?
I mean, first of all, completely relate to that. I've spent so much money over the years on other people's courses and their trainings and things like that. And thankfully, there are certain people out there that are coming out as like they're uh, saying that they're neurodivergent. So, off the top of my head, Denise Duffield Thomas has, Elizabeth Goddard has, and someone else as well. But the thing that neurotypical things always seem to talk about is consistency,
Hmm.
and that does not work for us. It's
Nope.
boring.
Yeah.
And and it makes us feel trapped. And actually I really like, I think Elizabeth Goddard is a big one for this. um she talks a lot about experimenting and trying things and just putting them out there, and she obviously has quite a lot of different courses, and she puts out lots of different courses regularly, and she's a huge success. So I kind of look to her as a role model quite a lot, I think, because I like that idea of experimenting and having fun in your business. And I think you almost have to unlearn as a neurodivergent and as an ADHD person, because people with autism may find it different because they often deal much better with structure and things like that, and routine. So consistency might be more suited to them. But those with ADHD, we need something fun, we need something fresh, we need to make it novel. So almost let go of consistency. And I now think of it as, I'm going to be consistent showing up. I'm not going to be consistent about what I do, but like this week, I might do a newsletter, a podcast, an Instagram reel. Next week, I might focus on LinkedIn a bit more, or I might do some cool graphic or something like that. Have a lot of fun with it, I think, is a big thing. And I think that's why neurotypical stuff doesn't work, because theirs is very process driven, consistent. We're not process driven. Structure actually works really well for neurodivergence, but there have to be, specifically for ADHD people, there has to be flexibility in there. There has to be the pick and mix style of choosing what you're going to do. And I think that would be the biggest thing I would suggest to people, is just let go of this idea of consistency that neurotypical advice shoves down our throat.
Yeah, that's so true. I literally wrote a post about this the other day about the whole consistency thing, because I'm like, I have tried for years to be consistent, and I'll have a period where I'm really consistent. I do the thing, I'm on Instagram every day, whatever. And then I hit a point where I just can't, and then it stops, and then I beat myself up because I'm not consistent. And then people tell me that I need to be consistent to be successful. And I'm like, yeah, but I just can't. And
Yeah.
I'll do the thing where I'll give myself the structure and I'll create the plan and I'll have the plan and I'll look at the plan and I'll go, oh my God, this feels so constrictive. I don't want to do any of it. So then I'll
Yeah.
be like, nah, not doing anything at all. And I'll
Yeah.
like run away. And even recently, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to create one course and I'm going to focus on one course. I tried selling one course for the whole of last year. I was like, that's going to be my focus. And it just did not work. And it
No.
got to the point where I like resented this thing that I'd created because it wasn't fun, because I was sick of talking about it, because no one was buying it. And then I have loads of other ideas all the time. And I'm like, well, there's no point me creating those things, because what if no one buys, or I don't want to launch, or I don't want to follow this process. And now I'm like, oh, maybe I'll just do whatever I want whenever I want and see what happens.
Yeah, just have fun with it. And Ruth Poundwhite talks about it a lot as well. She did like a pop-up Voxer group thing, and there was a lot of talk in there about, just experiment, try things, and go with what you're like. Wake up one day and just go with what you want to do. Some things do need consistency, and that's where I hire in a neurotypical. So my VA is lovely. She is very neurotypical. She's brilliant. So my newsletters need to go out every week. That is something I am consistent about. We plan out the content at the start of the month. I send her, or there's a Google Doc with the content in there that I create, and then she does all the scheduling, the formatting, the stuff that the finishing stuff that I cannot do. She's my favorite finisher. But she also knows that I will plan out that content, and sometimes I get to that week and go, I don't really want to talk about that. I'm going to change the subject. I'll talk about something else. It's fine. Like, it doesn't matter. Nobody knows that I've gone off plan. And I think when you treat it, spontaneously, it all becomes a lot more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to look at ways that I can bring more fun back into my business now. And I feel like I've started to do that recently. Like, I had an idea the other day and I was like, yeah, I'm just going to go with this and we'll see what happens. And there's been some interest. I'm like, oh, it does pay to like actually just follow the spontaneity, as you say. Um, I think one of the ADHD symptoms that I've kind of seen or heard about is that feeling like maybe you're not good enough, or feeling stuck in perfectionism, and sometimes being completely frozen from taking action, which we kind of talked about earlier, because we don't feel like we'll get it right. So what's the point in doing it anyway? If we're not going to get it right, why bother? How have you found the confidence to be messy and unpolished and show up for yourself and your business without letting those thoughts take over and prevent you from moving forward?
Or putting my coaching hat on, perfectionism is basically your brain's way of stopping you getting hurt or putting something out that might give you some rejection. So the brain is basically saying, look, it needs to be perfect, or I can't put it out there because I cannot deal with any kind of rejection. But kind of done is better than perfect is a massive mantra of mine. I would rather put stuff out that is a little bit messy. And also I think I'm quite honest now on social that I am a bit messy, and everything about my business is going to be a bit messy, and that's okay because stuff gets done. My clients are happy. My client work isn't messy. It's just sometimes some of my processes might be, or it all might be a little bit last minute and things like that. Making peace with being messy, I think, and then being honest about it is, and I think as a freelancer that can be really difficult because you don't want to be like that with clients, and it depends what your client basis is. But yeah, making peace with messiness, and that is a part of fun as well. And maybe reframing messiness as just having fun, because like if you think about it, when you're a kid, getting messy meant that you were having fun. You'd be painting and you make a bit of a mess, but you'd be doing something you were really proud of. So yeah, but I think, or just mainly remembering that perfection is your body's way or your brain's way of stopping you being rejected. But if you don't put anything out there, that's almost worse than being rejected. And
Yeah.
the rejection is just not there anyway.
That's kind of like you're like rejecting yourself, really, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
you're rejecting yourself before anyone else can reject you, which is not great.
The number of freelancers I speak to who are waiting for their website to be perfect, or their package to be perfect, or their logo to be perfect. I'm just like, just get out there, and you could already have a client, and then that would give you the money to do those things. But stop waiting for all these things to be perfect and ready and find the perfect niche. Ugh, that's a big bugbear of mine. All these things. Stop waiting, because that is holding you back from growing your business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's such good advice. Before we go, what would be your biggest piece of advice for running a business for anyone who is neurodivergent? And do you have any kind of resources that you can point us in the direction of for ADHD people?
So get yourself a community of other people who get it. If you are neurodivergent, surround yourself or follow accounts, because it will just it gives you permission to be who you are. So that would probably be my biggest advice, is just follow people. And it's just such a relief to just watch like a TikTok and just see someone else who gets it, and you don't feel like, the whole lazy and stupid and things. You're like, these people are clearly intelligent and feel the same way as I do. So yeah, I think that would probably be my biggest one, is surround yourself by people who get it. Right, good resources. So I mentioned Struggle Care, who is also Domestic Blisters on TikTok. She has an incredible book called Keeping House While Drowning. I think that's what it's called. I recommend it for every single ADHD person I know, because she talks a lot about how, and it is more about housework and looking after yourself, self-care, but actually I think it can be applied to a lot of things, but how like cleaning and stuff like that, these are not morally, they're morally, sorry, they are morally neutral tasks. So emptying the dishwasher, it's not morally positive, it's not morally negative. I'm not a bad person if I don't do the dishwasher straight away. I mean, if I leave it 3 weeks, it's not ideal, but it doesn't mean I'm a bad person. And it takes a lot of the emotional pressure of how you feel and the negativity. I really, really recommend her book. And she talks a bit more. She recently got diagnosed with ADHD as well. There is a guy who I'm going to have to send you his details underneath. He does some amazing tweets about ADHD, and it was through him actually that I found the sort of fun, novel, competitive, urgent, jump starting to motivation. So I'm really sorry I've forgotten his name, but I will pop it below, but give you the information. Who else is there? There's a lady on YouTube who I'll give you the details to, who talks about ADHD and all the different ways that it affects you, but in really short and sweet videos. There are some ADHD podcasts, but it blows my mind that they're like an hour long. People with ADHD don't have that that patience. So yes, I'm probably not going to recommend them. But yeah, I would say Domestic Blisters is the best place to start, especially if you're a woman. But I'll give you the details of the other guy as well, because it's fantastic.
Amazing. That'll be so, so helpful. And it's gonna be so interesting for me to dive even deeper down the ADHD rabbit hole. So thank you so much for being here, Emma. I've really, really loved this chat. Where can we find you if we want to know more?
Yeah, so you can find me at freelancelifestyle.co.uk. I have a Facebook group called the Freelance Lifestylers, and loads of us are neurodivergent, so feel free to come join us. I have a podcast called the Freelancers Teabreak, which is usually less than 10 minutes, so very ADHD friendly. And I am Emma Cossey on most social media places.
Amazing. Thanks so much for being here, and we will see you in the next one.